Hi, I'm Khushboo Razdan, and this is Foreign Correspondents Talk Series 2024, an initiative by the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents USA, where we invite members of the foreign press community to talk about their work story and experiences. And today I have with me Pittsburgh-based journalist Fernanda Silva from Brazil. Hi, Fernanda, welcome, and how are things on your side of the country?
Thank you so much. Everything is good over here. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today.
So, you are based in the Midwest. I have generally interviewed journalists based in Washington. What made you go to that part of the country? Midwest is something even Americans don't go to. What made a Brazilian move to the Midwest and work as a journalist?
That is a very good question that I get every day, pretty much every day when I'm interviewing somebody. People go like, how do you end up over here?
Yeah.
And the answer for that I always say, it's a long story short, but not too short. In 2013, I was an exchange student in Shawnee, Kansas. And that was random. So as an exchange student for high school, I just applied to be an exchange student. And you can pay a little bit more money to choose the location you're going to. And I was just like, oh, you know what? Destiny is going to choose for us. I say for us because I have a twin sister who was also an exchange student at the same time. So I was based in Shawnee, Kansas, and she was based in Howesville, Missouri. So both of us were in the Midwest, but having two very different experiences. So in Shawnee, Kansas, it's more like a big city. It's next to Kansas City. So I still got that big city vibes. In Howesville, Missouri, it's a rural area. So it's tractor pulls and things like that. And right now, where I'm based in Pittsburgh, it's very similar to what Hausu is like. So it's more of a country lifestyle.
So tell me the difference, because I have never been to countryside US. I've lived in New York City and Washington. And people tell me, I say, oh, I really like US. They're really nice to me. They don't care what skin I am. But the people are like, oh, you know what? Move to the Midwest and you will know how good it is. You've only tell me the difference. What's the difference like?
So people here are extremely friendly. Everybody, I think it's just part of the Midwest culture. It's like if you go to the grocery store, people are gonna be holding the door for you to enter and smiling and saying, oh, of course you're welcome. Just like those little conversations that you have with random people. Here, this is very common. I feel like I'm from São Paulo, which is the biggest city in South America. And it's a very big difference in the pace and the rhythm of life. Here, everything, it's more like, I'm going to give a journalistic example. So in Brazil, I used to be a producer, which means I was scheduling interviews for the reporters to do. Here, I'm a reporter, but I also produce my own stories. So in Brazil, if I called a doctor to try to schedule an interview with them, they would be like, oh, can we make it next week? Because I'm super busy. I don't have any time available. Here, I call and people are like, yeah, can you be here in half an hour? Yeah, that works for me. So that's a pretty big difference, that being in a smaller area, smaller towns. So the city that I'm in, Pittsburgh, in Joplin. So I live in Joplin, but I work in Pittsburgh. It's half an hour drive on Route 66, which is kind of fun, like the American dream kind of vibe. But it's farms. I say that I go all the way. Hi, Cal. Hi. It's very rural, so it's a lot of farms. It's a lot of crops. So that's my drive pretty much every day. And because it's so rural, every city, it's at least half an hour drive. So if I'm going from Pittsburgh, let's say to Knoll, Missouri, it's 40 minutes, or to Miami, Oklahoma. Those are two cities that are in the covering area. It's a lot of driving and a lot of farms, and that's kind of how it goes. And when you see a city, you're like, oh my God. When I come to Kansas City, I'm like, oh my God, I kind of forget how big a city can be.
So,
What
kind of stories do you do when you are, you said that you covered the 4 states. What are these 4 states, and what kind of stories do you cover here? I mean, we hear so much about Midwest here, and you just said that people are very friendly, and I've heard exactly the opposite. I've never been there.
Really?
Yeah, and actually, I've heard that in Brazil, people are very friendly, and they will talk to you
I like to think
for hours. So
I
tell
would say that's kind of interesting that what you're saying, that I do believe people are very friendly here. I don't think they are used to diversity as much as a person from New York or as much as a person from Florida. Maybe in the coasts, they see more, or not maybe, for sure, they see more diversity, so they're probably more used to having that. But I've never had a situation where people were mean to me because of that diversity. I do think that part of it's because I've always been protected by somebody or someone. And what I mean by this is, as an exchange student, I had my host family, who were this American family who were protecting me. Then I come back to the US 10 years later to get my master's from a very respected university in the area. It's the University of Kansas. So every time I said I'm a master's student at KU, that would, I guess people would respect that. And then now I work at a local TV station that also comes with that protection and that sense of I'm doing something for this community. And then on the doing something for this community, on my covering or the things that I cover on a daily basis, it ranges a lot. So I'm going to give you an example from two of these stories I did this week. One of them was more like a picture cute story that it's this guy, a local guy, who is going to the Olympics. So it's just talking about this achievement and how his family is proud of him going to the Olympics and where he practices and things like that. The other story is that in the city of Pittsburgh, they installed some cameras to see the license plates of the cars. And people were concerned about that with privacy and things like that. So I did a story to explain what are those cameras, how they work, and answering those concerns. So it kind of goes, I honestly, everything that is happening in the community, I cover it. If it is when the Israel war started, there's a woman from Israel who lives in Joplin. So we did an interview with her. And the one thing that is very different from what I do here versus what I did in Brazil is that here I do the job of 9 different people in the TV station I used to work in Brazil. So here I think of the story ideas, I schedule the interviews, I drive to the location, I am asking the questions, but I'm also taking care of the camera. I go back to the TV station and make social media posts. I write for the website. I also do my makeup. I think that makes it 10. But I do my makeup, and then I make content for different things for the different shows in the TV station. So that's a pretty big difference.
TV station. You're a one-person TV station in your whole self.
Yeah, so we call it MMJ, multimedia journalist, and that's something that I feel like it's reality in the US, and it's becoming reality in other places. That's actually my thesis, and you probably have heard about this, that my thesis for my master's degree was the work of foreign correspondents in the US and how that have been changing over the years because of technologies. And I feel like in the US, we are now where in Brazil, we're going to maybe be in the future. I do think that in Brazil, we have more laws that protect the employees in the sense of you cannot have one person doing the job of many. So anyways, but yeah, it's a lot of things I do. Keep myself busy.
I have never met in my life a foreigner who is working for a local TV station covering the local community. Generally, people come here and cover, say, Indians cover India, Brazilians cover Brazil. But I cover US, China, but it's still international. I'm not covering a community. Kudos to you. But tell me something. How friendly are the officials? How easy it is for you? Because I was speaking to a European journalist yesterday, and she was like, it's very difficult for a foreign journalist to ask questions in the White House or the State Department. It's hard to get information because they prefer American journalists. How has been your experience at the local level?
Yeah, I think it's different for me for 2 reasons. First, because when we're talking about Washington, it's much bigger. When we're talking about the mayor of some cities, I have their personal phone numbers. So I literally can just call them and they're going to answer my questions or my concerns or schedule an interview. So I think on the local level, it's much more informal. It's many less layers to get to the person that you want to talk versus when you're talking also from a big city, probably not New York, you wouldn't have the phone number of the mayor versus in a smaller town. You do have that. I think the other thing is, as a foreign correspondent, maybe they're covering for a TV station that the person that they are trying to interview are not familiar with. So if they go to the mayor of New York and they say, oh, I work for this Brazilian newspaper, that mayor might not know what they're talking about. And in a local perspective, the person, there are only 2 TV stations covering the area that I cover. So everybody knows the TV station that I work for in that area. And it's a very respected TV station in the sense of like the anchor is there for 40 years. So everybody knows him. Another anchor has been there for 20 years. The weatherman or the meteorologist, he has been there for almost 30 years, I want to say. So it really is a community, and it has that sense of community in not only in the TV station, but also outside of it. Obviously, sometimes when you're doing more of a political story, some people might say, oh, you guys take this side or that side and things like that. But it is definitely, I feel like it's a little bit less bureaucratic than it would be in bigger cities or covering the, US, Washington, and White House and things like that.
Very interesting. Can you tell me the 4 states that you cover? You cover Ohio, Oklahoma.
Oh, it's Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas. So there's a division there. There's the 4 states. So I cover kind of like a 1-hour array in a circle in that area. So it is Southwest Missouri, Southeast Kansas, Southwest Missouri, North, need to think about that. Northwest Arkansas and Northeast Oklahoma. I want to say, I get the directions all wrong, but anyways, it's not state area here.
Okay, and so when did you move back to the US? You said you came in 2013 and then you left and then you came back, which was when?
So it was 2021. So I went back to Brazil, then I got my undergrad degree. I was working professionally, covering mostly sports, which is kind of interesting.
And you interviewed the Great Pele, right?
Yes, I did. It was a huge honor.
I had to do that.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to go back to how I start with sports, and then I come to how I end up in the US. Yeah, but it's kind of a funny story. I was an intern for the TV, so it is a communication complex that I studied in Brazil. So it is a university, a TV station, 2 radio stations, a sports website. And then I was working as an intern for the TV station / for the university, I was the director for the TV show that the students from the university made for the TV station. So that's how I learned how to do everything, how to edit, how to schedule interviews, how to think of story ideas and things like that. But then I was doing that and I had 100% tuition, which was amazing, but I didn't have a salary on top of that. And then one day the HR calls me and says, hey, there's a position to work with the sports. You're going to have 100% of your tuition paid, but you're going to have a salary on top of that. Do you want to try this? And I said, oh, I know nothing about sports. Thank you so much, but no. And then the woman insisted. And then she was like, it's just going to be a test, something simple. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to try, let's see what happens. Then I did a test and it was 10 questions about sports. And I didn't know how to answer any of them. And then I wrote, honestly, I know nothing about sports, but I'm willing to learn. And they hired me saying, we cannot teach somebody sports, but we can teach somebody. Or we can teach somebody sports, but we cannot teach somebody to be honest. So they hired me with that. And that's how I ended up working with the sports. Maybe crying for a couple of weeks, going to work, saying, I know nothing about this. How I'm going to make this work. But anyways, it worked. And then I had the honor of interviewing Pele, which was a very amazing experience. But I also like to say that I treated him as a human. When I saw him, I was like, it's my granddad here. Obviously I know how special he is, but I just tried to make that really a conversation.
How can we find that interview? Is it available somewhere on the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. You probably, if you look up the day I interviewed Pele, you can find that on my YouTube channel, and I can send the link to you, and you can also put it together with this interview.
Yeah, and football is very famous there, very popular in Brazil. In my country, it's not, but we know Pele. Everyone knows. Who doesn't know?
It was an amazing experience for sure.
You know, it reminds me that I had completely forgotten. Back in 2009, I also started my career as a sports journalist, and I had no idea about journalism, about sports at that time, sports journalism at that time. But somehow I managed a month. It was a 1 month thing just for my for my degree, and I had no idea. But the thing is that we do cricket a lot, and
Oh,
I grew up watching cricket with my brother, so that is the only thing I could. Tennis and everything else, I just couldn't.
well, I didn't even know soccer, to be honest with you. When I started with sports, I support Santos, which is the last soccer team, the team that he played. But I
Uh-huh.
had no idea if the team was doing well or not. You know, I was the kind of person who would wear the jersey if we were winning. But obviously, when you start covering sports, you
Yeah.
kind of pay more attention to that. But actually, covering sports plays a little bit of a role on why I came back to the US. So
Mm-hmm.
how that happens is, so I got my first master's in Brazil. I was getting my master's when the pandemic started. I was working
Mm-hmm.
and also getting my master's. And then the pandemic started, and everybody who was covering sports started covering local news with a perspective from COVID. So the TV show that we used to have, that's called Gazeta Esportiva, became a show which is a sports show, became a show called Plantão da Saúde. I was trying to remember that it's like all about COVID.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I realized that I was passionate about telling people's story outside of sports. Obviously, loving what I did with sports, but I was passionate about telling people's story. And in that show, I had the opportunity of producing stories that were related, more like human stories versus focused on the game. And then I was like, oh, maybe this is the opportunity I have to kind of leave sports a little bit. So when I was an exchange student, all of my high school friends went to the University of Kansas. And going to KU has always been a dream just because I saw my friends going there. It sounded super fun,
Mm-hmm.
but I couldn't go for my undergrad. So during the pandemic, I decided to apply to go to KU. And then it was an application process, but I ended up getting a 100% scholarship. So they paid my tuition. And I worked for the university teaching. So they gave me a salary on top of that as well. And then I was like, I cannot say no. So I moved back to the US. And then I was getting my master's for 2 years. I graduated in May, and that's another interesting thing. When I graduated, there's something called OPT. So that's
Mm-hmm.
an extension for the student visa to work legally in the US for a year,
Mm-hmm.
or in my case, for a year, because if you're on mathematics or engineering, it's 3 years,
That's
but in
3 years.
journalism is 1 year. And I was applying for jobs, but every job for TV stations, and that's what I wanted to do, they are 2 year contracts. And the
Mm-hmm.
TV stations couldn't hire me because if they cannot hire somebody for a 2 year contract if that person can only work legally in the US for a year.
Yeah.
And most TV stations were that way, but the TV station that I work now, they had a 1 year contract. And I was like, okay, that works well.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I ended up moving to the south of the state to go to KOAM News. That's where I work
That's
currently.
very interesting. And this area, elections are coming. We have, presidential elections coming in November. So, what's your sense like in these four areas that you're covering? Where is the wind blowing towards? It's Biden or Trump? Because I hear rural areas are more, more tilting. They're tilting towards Trump.
Oh
What's
yeah,
the
I
situation
would
there?
say that definitely in that area, it's Trump. I
Mm-hmm.
did an interview maybe 2 weeks ago when the primaries happened in Oklahoma. I went to Miami, Oklahoma. And then I was doing a man on the street asking people, why are you voting the way you're voting? I didn't ask them who they were voting for. The question was, why you're voting the way you're voting. And most of them said who they were voting for. I think I interviewed 8 people, and 7 were voting for Trump and 1 voting for Biden. And the things I asked them, why you're voting, right? That was the question. And the borders, immigration, gas prices, grocery prices, those are definitely the top of their list on why they're voting the way they're voting. A lot of them said the economic concerns or how they were able to buy more things in the past. A lot of them said a lot of the immigrants are getting in the United States and they're destroying our country, and all of those conceptions that they have. So those are definitely of course I cannot generalize, But those were the things that I heard from people who were voting.
Mm-hmm. And is foreign policy any concern? You know, we in Washington we hear a lot about U.S.-China relations, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza. Are people really talking about all those things? And does it really matter to them when they go out and vote and choose their president?
I think it does. But like from our perspective on local news, for example, we try to focus really on what is local. So when they're talking to us, or when I'm out in the street asking people things like that, they focus on the local concerns more than on the outside of the local concerns. So what affects them personally, and I think that's one of the things, like in that area, when I moved there, I was not expecting to meet any Brazilians because it's an area with not a lot of immigrants, period. There is a city that has a lot of immigrants, actually two cities there that have a lot of immigrants, but it's the place that you're gonna go to Walmart and you're gonna see that everybody is American. You know what I mean? So there, it's a pretty big difference when I go, for example, to Walmart in Joplin or in Pittsburgh versus when I come to Kansas City, that it's a more diverse area. So I would say that those people, they, at least when they talk to me as a reporter, they refer more to their personal concerns than to the outside concerns. And maybe that's because they're talking to me as a local reporter and they are not sharing their perspectives on outside issues because we're focusing on local news.
And before I let you go, I really want to ask, how's the gun situation there? Do you see are guns legal in those four areas that you cover? What
I
about
cannot say in all the states. I would need to do some research. That's a good question. I don't know all of these states, but I've definitely been to people's house and they have their guns displayed. And
wow.
yeah, it is. It's not uncommon.
I would run away. I am very scared of guns.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think it is something very common in that area. It's a lot of like them wanting to feel that protection, privacy issues are big, security issues are very big, things like that. So I would say, I don't know if in all the four states they are legal or not. I cannot tell you that, and I can look up and share the information with you. But I've been to places where literally the person has a gun
As a
in
gun.
their
Wow.
living room.
Oh my God.
Just like displayed there. So I think it's a little bit of the cultural thing as well. It's a very rural area, like this person that I'm thinking right now. It's they live in a farm. So it is, maybe
So
they
the
don't feel,
yeah. So
they just feel the need of having that security there. Like the closest hospital to them, it's a 30-minute drive and things like that. So it is.
infrastructure is an issue, right? Because the Infrastructure Reduction Act was, the infrastructure bill was passed and billions of dollars are being spent. So infrastructure is something that the US is working on right now. But
Absolutely.
talking to you has been such a wonderful experience. Thank you so much for your
Of
time.
course.
Yes, and let me know if you are on this side of the country, and I would love to catch up over, over.
Absolutely. I would love that too.